over into the Hive, and I just want to make sure I don't ever forget it. Also record it, but it takes just a little bit to get it set up. I actually had like 5 weeks off when my last class stopped, and then you're the first group of 2024. I had to actually kind of remember how to do how to do some of this stuff. I hadn't done it for so long. All right. Make sure I Levi's here. Let's see what else I'm missing. Shannon, let me grab you. Shania, got you. So Sam. All right. It's 8 o'clock, everybody. Happy Wednesday. I hope you had a fabulous week. Made some really amazing things happen. I don't think I said this the other night, and I'm remiss at it, so I apologize. But I want to, tell you that I really appreciate what you're doing with this, because I know how hard it is. You work all day, and sometimes in HR that is just draining in and of itself. I get that, right? I always used to say, is there anybody on the floor I haven't talked to today that's got a problem? Or I used to like say, I sometimes, I couldn't hit the ground if I fell over, right? You just have those days. So you do that. You've got your personal life, families, commitments, and then you've got this, right? And that's a lot. And I know what it's like. And I want to just say that I appreciate you all. I don't know you personally, get to know each other a little bit better, but you are a tribute to your organizations for what you're going through to improve your skills and abilities to make them better. And I hope they realize that, right? Because this is not easy. And you're certainly a tribute to the profession. It's folks like you that will continue to help elevate our profession in general, and in sometimes the craziness of laws and everything that we've got going on, and the craziness of social things that will go on. It's crazy, right? And so I just really do appreciate that and want you to know that. I don't ever want you to forget it either. So with that, any questions on anything that we covered? From the other night, from Monday? Oh, you're welcome, Kim. And I mean it. I mean it sincerely. I had no idea till I went through this. Like, wow, this is commitment, right? And then just on top of everything, and some of you are the West Coast. It's not quite evening. Some of you on the East Coast, it's 8 o'clock, right? After if you were lucky enough to eat dinner and sit down for a minute, it's going again, or maybe you just continued straight through, right? But yeah, I always say that's what red wine was made for, and also hot tamales. The hot tamales is my passion. So the super hot ones. So I got a few of them waiting there when we're going to be done this evening. All right, I think I got it. Okay, I'll just keep an eye on, and margaritas. I could probably, well, we could probably just go on with that list, but that's actually the Friday night thing. It's always The family, we always go to the little Mexican place just right up the street from us, not too far, and Margarita Friday night. And then we got just the wait staff, everybody, they're great friends. See them all the time. We do stuff together outside. So yeah, but that's Friday. And it just depends, is it small, medium, or large, right? That's this week might be a large with having to travel to the office and new hires and keep everything going. And of course, I'd say this, right? You just have those days. The last 2 days, it's poured rain all day. I'm in the car going, and my right windshield wiper is missing. That had not happened before. So thank goodness I had the one on the driver's side. It's not in good shape. So it was a tad bit of a stressful trip today. Dark in the morning and raining on the way up, and then just pouring on the way home and gray. But so I got a trip to the parts store to go ahead and get that fixed as well. All right, let's dive in. I'll try to be mindful of your time, leave a few minutes for questions, and if we're good, we'll go. We're going to go up through page 54 tonight. So we're going to really start here on organizational strategy. So a lot of what Unit 1 is about, it's really not necessarily so much the HR side of the house, as it is what makes an organization tick, right? How are they set up? How are they structured? And we're going to start that here, right? What are the ways that they're going to choose to compete? So we're going to look at this at a 50,000 foot view, and then everything that we're going to look at in units 2, 3, 4, and really the first part of 5, and then the other components of 5 is how do we, now that we understand this organizational strategy and what they're trying to do, how do we then align HR to that to help them execute that? And I think when we do that well as HR, that becomes really our biggest competitive advantage. And that's one of the things that you'll see there as well. So organizational strategy. Tonight, we want to differentiate between vision and mission statements. They're different. We want to define and demonstrate the attributes of strategic theories. And we want to examine the 6 steps within the strategic management process. So again, SPHR and SHRM, either SCP or CP, this is your big one. Unit 1 and SHRM, it's 50%. I think it's like 34 here. PHR, I think it's 14. So this is really heavily weighted. PHR, your candidates, your big one is Unit 5. I think that's around 45%. And so the bookends here are really critical. And then we cover a lot of content in 2, 3, and 4 that makes up, a bit smaller component of the exam, which is okay, because you'll know in Unit 2, okay, we really have to look at recruiting, job analysis, and then we get into 3, how do we measure training and performance reviews? So I'll try to call out as we go through this things that I know or have seen or think will be on the exam as we go through it as well. So we start on page 20, right? What does strategy mean, right? And, if my boss said it really well the other day, as consultants or employees, we're really successful if we have a strategy, right? And then we have a plan to execute that strategy. So the strategy is kind of the end state. We want to do this, right? My strategy to make extra money, right, might be trading futures. And my plan might be get up early, get my work done, do this, do this, do this. So strategy, has a big piece because HR is really tied to that, right? So it begs the question, what's this mean? And really, strategy is, in essence, what is put in place that bridges the gap between the current state and ultimately where do we want to go. When I was working with Spectrum Enterprise on the B2B, the Enterprise was our B2B telecom solution provider. So we're selling cloud storage and network connections and different things to businesses. Our strategy, really kind of our vision statement strategy, was we wanted to go from a 2.5 billion company to a 5 billion company, double it in 5 years. Okay. And then, the different areas of how we get there mattered. So in our efforts as HR leaders, right, is to be parallel with the company leadership And strategy means, frankly, everything relative to making the company successful, just pure and simple. After all, success is winning. And if you look at the different things in the strategy, now I will tell you before I go through these, the best written strategy is probably outdated the minute it's written and put on paper, right? That just happens. It's businesses are living dynamic environments, and it's probably going to be outdated pretty quickly. And that's why you'll hear me talk about the importance, and we'll get into that a little bit more in unit 3 and 4, but about how you want to measure everything, right? You want to, from an HR perspective, you want to measure things that impact the business and how they look at it. So if your strategy is off base, you'd rather figure that out, 10% into the way versus waiting till you're you're at the end of the year, and then all of a sudden you go, well, wow, what, that didn't work. Well, let's figure it out early. So strategy, right? There's decision making. Okay. You want to make sure we're making the right decisions based on market, what we're doing. It's certainly, and maybe the most important, is just really good communication, right? That we're communicating with the employees, with customers, with shareholders. Employees need to understand why we're doing something, right? So they can put context around it and either support it and get behind it, or if the strategy changes. I often think too, communication is, how are we doing? What are our results? It's about coordinating, and that, I think, where HR plays a big role. How do we get the different departments to work not only together, but how do we get everyone in the same department going in the same direction? We're going to coordinate things like, benefit updates, or we're going to coordinate things about the performance review process. How do we make that work? And then make sure that it adds value to the organization. It's certainly about looking at the direction that we're going to set, right? And being able to work with the executive team about that direction so we understand it, we can execute it. It's certainly about planning. So I would think in terms of HR, one of the most important things for the planning is certainly, our headcount. How many people are going to add? What do we think our turnover is going to be? And what are we trying to look for in terms of planning, right? And needing to understand that, and planning, even activities like performance reviews. That is a big, piece of the process that we just can't necessarily, surprise people with that. So all sorts of different things on planning. And then ultimately it's about sustainability, right? That the things that we're doing as an organization, right, that we can put in place. If you're going to build a comp structure, for example, for your sales reps, can you sustain that, right? Is it aligned to what they're doing? Because one of the things we made a big mistake on when we had been selling predominantly small businesses and we moved in the enterprise space. So we were trying to figure out, that was a whole new thing where we didn't really do this tree very well. And one of the challenges was we just never really thought out the comp strategy. And so about every quarter, we were changing sales reps comps, and it wasn't sustainable. Well, we're paying them too much money, right? They did better than we thought. Well, we should have factored that in. And that was just an engagement killer. We had a lot of the good people left. It's like, yeah, finally start making some money, and you changed on me. I'm out. I'm not going to do that. So those are the types of things that you're looking at around the business strategy, and always thinking about, what do we need to do basically with these 6 elements on the tree. And if something changes, then how do we deal with it? Or do we know if it's working and maybe we need to change it, right? And so if we look at organizational strategy, then it is defined as the goals and the set of policies designed to achieve competitive advantage in a particular marketplace, right? You're going to see that word likely show up in your exam. And it's about, how do we basically execute our strategy. We have to have the right strategy, then execute it better than our competitors to make us either more profitable, more revenue, what have you. when I was in that telecom world, I was just telling this story. My boss came from it, and we were talking about it today, and I was telling my new hire, we were talking about trying to sell accounts, and I said in the telecom world, right, we were going out cold calling businesses, right, trying to convert them and sell them, and you could walk into any business and there would be between 6 and 8 proposals on the desk, right? And thing is, I always like to say, if you had covered up the logo on those proposals, you couldn't tell one from the other. Fairly commodity driven business, right? The things that we were offering were all the same. A couple had a little something different. So at the end of the day, what makes us competitive? Well, lots of different things, right? You can compete on price, and we're going to look at that. But to me, it came down to how well did we execute our strategy and how well do we utilize the people, right? If we got the right employees, the right people, treated them right, and put good things in place, then that became what was your competitive advantage. So you might be in a commodity driven market, right? You might have, multiple car dealerships. What sets you apart from someone else? Maybe it's service. Well, that comes down to people doing it. So the competitive advantage then is really defined as that ability to transform inputs into goods and services at maximum profit on a sustained basis better than the competitors. So competitive advantage obviously can be product, right? iPhone has a big competitive advantage in their phones with everything that it does, and it ties back to their computers and all that, maybe versus some of the other ones, right? So you might have huge competitive advantage in, for example, early on, Tesla was like the premier and early on the only auto manufacturer producing electric vehicles, and so they had a competitive advantage. They took the inputs, the outputs. They were smart because they went out and they got the early adopters for electric vehicles, and they were not only making money, but they were getting huge payments from the government because the other manufacturers were getting penalized for not being at certain EV production, and that money was going over to Tesla. So their strategy was, let's build a good luxury car that's EV based, and let's get the early adopters. So that's really slowed down now. A lot of Ford just cut back, where they thought now, hey, this EV craze is going to be a competitive advantage for us. A lot of businesses are finding out it's not the case, right? That they can't get them off the lot. And unfortunately, when it got really cold here lately, a lot of them didn't charge or hold a charge, right? So certain things like that. So to me, it's product, but it's also the people. You can have a really great product and you can mess it up because you don't necessarily execute it right. So I think that's how I look at it, is how do we help position that strategy best through what we've done and what we can do with people. And sometimes that goes back to executive coaching and getting the leadership on board to be transparent and so forth and so on, to work through people there as well. So if you think about then really, really high level, right? We have a vision statement, and most organizations have one, not all. And the vision statement clearly describes the future of the company as a successful organization. Dr. Benjamin Hardy has written a book on Become Your Future Self Now, and he talks about your vision for who do you want to become as a human. You see that happening and you work backwards from it. You work backward, like, let's say I want to be a multi-millionaire futures trader, right? Well, I see myself as that. That's obviously the vision. I act as if I'm coming from that spot, and I work backwards so I can do the things now that will help me get there. Okay. Companies the same way. That vision statement is ultimately, what do they subscribe to, right? Our strategy was encapsulated a lot in our vision statement to go from a $2.5 billion company to a $5 billion company in 5 years. In 5 years, we're going to double this revenue. The genius of that was, if you look at the 8 boxes there, it was really concise. Okay. It was exceptionally clear that there was nothing left to interpretation. A time horizon, 5 years. future oriented in 5 years, right? It was challenging. We're going to double revenue in 5 years. Fairly stable, right? We were in a growth market. We were having 20% growth every year. And it was inspiring, right? You go, okay, I get that, right? I can wrap my head around it. So not to confuse it, we'll get a mission statement next. Vision is what do we want to be? And then let's act from that place there and work backwards. Okay. One of the best things to do when you want to look at your future self is how to, if I want to be a multi-million-dollar futures trader in 5 years, right? So I see that now. Okay, Chris, what did you do to get here? Well, I had to do this, 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 and this. It's an incredible way to look at it versus trying to always look at the rise and act like it's there. I even wrote letters to my future self, 3 months, 1 year, whatever, 5 years. And then I wrote a letter from my future self to myself today. And I did it from the point, hey, I'm there. All these goals I wanted, I accomplished, and here's how I did it. Here's advice to you. It's powerful. Great book. Dr. Hardy's great stuff. Anybody, kids, real easy to read and write. Companies do the same thing, right? How do you act from that? And that's good because it gives us a barometer as HR and what we need to know that we can go after and how we do that. Then you've got the mission statement, okay? And a mission statement is really explains the essence of an organization, why it exists, and what we want to be, what it serves, and what it continues. So a mission statement then is basically what we do. Okay. Again. Take a note here. So if you think about a mission statement, right, it's talking about what's our core purpose, what businesses are we in, and then what values will guide us. And, these are somewhat, I'm going to give you a couple examples here. Let me type them up. These are hard to write because you want to be very concise. So what's our purpose, what business are in, what values guide us? So for me, and everything I've read about this and looked at is if you're going to have a mission statement, and it should be transcend everything you do in the organization. Everyone should know it, understand it, be able to talk about it, see it, live it, breathe it, feel it, and let that be your North Star, so to speak. I also think your mission statement, much like we talked about with the vision statement here, it should be inspiring, right? It's something that you want to go, geez, I understand that, and I can now see what I'm going to do. So let me give you a couple. Coca-Cola's mission statement is to refresh the world, to inspire moments of optimism and happiness, and to create value and make a difference, right? They're not talking about the vision of what they want to be in 10 years. This is what we do. Okay, to me, that's pretty cool. It's pretty inspiring, right? It's something that I go, all right, I get that. I can go around. I think another one, let me give you Starbucks. And their mission statement is to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. All right, kind of get that. I'm going to give you another one. I'm not going to give you the name of the company. Yeah, they literally just went through that, right? And that was let's see if I got the latest one. Sam, that you said that. Let me do that. New mission statement. So their new mission, our mission, with every cup, with every conversation, with every community, we nurture the limitless possibilities of human connection. It's beautiful, right? Fairly similar to the other one. Okay, so, but let me give you one that, while it's not bad, it's not necessarily the same, right? And so I'm more of a bit of a person that likes inspiring. Oops. So this is another one. To be the leader in the distribution and merchandising of food, pharmacy, health, and personal care items, seasonal merchandise, and related products and services. Okay. It does clearly talk about what businesses are in, what our purpose, but it didn't really talk about the values. So while it's not horrible, I make your own determination. For me, that doesn't necessarily really light me up. It's like, all right, I get it, but putting something now there's you know no wonder companies pay several $100,000 to have somebody come in and write one. So yeah, that's a good one. I appreciate that. Yeah, well, and if they get too long, right, then that becomes just cumbersome because then you can't remember it. And I had was doing did a coach's corner on this, and there was one mission statement was like a paragraph long. I'm like, oh my God. I think it was for like baby, like diapers and clothes and different things. And, just an epic fail, right? I mean, so, but all that, the mission and the vision, a lot of companies don't necessarily have a vision, but the mission really should be prominent throughout everything that you're doing. And when you do that, right, you're trying to look at what's the purpose you want to encapsulate, what's the business statement you want to include in there, and then what's the value statement as well. Not necessarily easy. And I think, it's kind of fun if you want to do that. And I did it when I was working on stuff for my future self. It's like, what's my personal mission statement and my vision statement, working through that as well. All right. Questions on any of that? Good. All right. Keep an eye on chat. We'll keep rolling here. So the role of the strategy then, right, is that the strategy involves that combination of the goals and the plans that you have, right? You're probably going to have them as an enterprise, and you're going to have the goals and plans of each department: sales, marketing, product development, customer service, engineering, finance, everything. So you combine all of the goals and the plans to achieve a competitive advantage. How is what we're doing going to make us better than our competition, right? And we can sell more, be more profitable. And then what are the different methods for implementing them? Okay. So if you think about different characteristics of a generic strategy, certainly it's about promoting the mission and goals of the organization. Okay. Very clearly internal. Mission probably promoted external, goals maybe not so much, although they will be if it's a public company in your SEC filings. It's making sure you get that long-term focus that extends beyond the immediate time horizon. Immediate time horizon usually mean 12 months. So what's the 1 year, maybe the 5 year, 10 year, right? You might have a tech company. Long term might be a 5 year horizon, maybe a company like a real estate company or banking company that is not quite as experiencing so many changes, right? That's 10 year, right? Time horizons. It's got to be what works for the organization. It's about then defining the action plans the organization intends to follow to achieve its mission and goals. This is what we said we're going to do. Let's go do it. And then let's measure how we did against that. And you want to start measuring stuff very early in the process, because you might find like, hey, we missed a mark in terms of our job description, or maybe people need refresher training, or our comp structures are not bringing in the people we need, or it's not producing the results, what have you. And then ultimately it's about recognizing explicitly, very clearly, the impact of the external environment, right? And so the external environment, we're going to look at that. It's like your political environment, your legal, your social, your economic, all of those, even the physical climate, right? Environment, competitors, pricing, federal laws, state laws, but in particular also competitors, right? What are they doing? Because again, they're doing the same thing. It's kind of like, football game. You got two teams preparing, and one's going to win, one isn't. And so you want to really figure out what are competitors, and you see this really competitive, like in the pharmaceutical industry, right? When who can get to market with this new medicine first, right? So it might be a new cancer drug. I remember, if you think about new antibiotics or something new, new cholesterol medicine, a couple came up with something that wasn't a statin, that Repatha, that was that it dealt with cholesterol better. A lot of people are having adverse reactions to statins, and you can inject it. Took it once every 2 weeks. Then a company came out with one that you just inject. You take it once every 6 weeks. So right, you're trying to look at, hey, if a competitor did it, what are we going to do to counteract that as well? So the goal of strategy, then, we want to look at this. It's really to find that competitive environment where a company has imperfect competition. Okay, so that doesn't happen very often, but what you're striving to is moving towards that. So ideally, the goal embedded in strategy is in perfect competition, because as you can see, and that's on the right-hand side of the screen here, that this type of competitive position is a monopoly or it's pretty close to it. So think about the airline industry as an example of perfect competition. Okay. So let me look at the two. Imperfect competition is what you're striving towards. So there are few, if any, competitors. There are numerous suppliers or buyers for that. Asymmetric information, heterogeneous products, barriers to entry, and supernormal profits. Okay, so that's imperfect. So you've got, for example, years ago, Walmart was a close example of imperfect competition, because they were kind of the one-stop shop for pretty much anything you needed. There weren't many places that you could go get groceries and tires and your script and pet food and lawn chairs and everything, right? And that they had pretty supernormal profits. Although they worked on pretty thin margins, they did a ton of volume. Okay. So that was an example. Now today, you might say imperfect competition. It's more like an Amazon, right? Because I can get literally anything I need from Amazon. I can get my groceries from there, toothpaste. I think we have stuff show up the house every day from Amazon, because why go to the store if I'm out of something? I needed today. I needed a couple of new supplements. I'll have them tomorrow, right? And so not many people compete that effectively. Temu is trying to do it, but not necessarily doing that so far. So that's imperfect competition. Perfect competition, again, and we use yeah, I tell you, Sarah, right? I mean, I'm 5'5", right? Short, and like 135 pounds, pretty lean with all the running I do. I can't go buy suits. They just don't have anything in 36 short. They're not slim fit, right? Shirts look like I'm wearing a trash can, right? So I just get all that stuff through Amazon, right? I mean, I just bought my wife a couple things the other day, and my daughter, and she needed a journal, and I needed knack, and boom, there it was. And I just couldn't do that through any other site, right? Let alone going in person. Now, the problem with that is it's like going shopping every day, and that's not necessarily good either. Perfect competition, then, we'll use the airline industry as an example. Numerous buyers and sellers, right? Not as many as there used to be, but I can, I'm going to DC here in a couple of weeks. I could have taken, United, Delta, American, Spirit, Frontier, Southwest, had numerous choices. Perfect information. I knew exactly when the flight times were and exactly what the cost was going to be, right? That was, that. Homogeneous products, it's an airline travel. It's a coach seat, period, right? Now, no barriers to entry or exit. Airline industry is probably not the best example, because there are, and they're financial and somewhat regulatory, but if I want to start an airline, I can. If I can get the capital, I can do it. There probably are some. Um, and then, average or below average profits, right? If you look at the cost of an airline ticket lately, you'd probably say, how's that possible? But fuel costs are terrible as well. So the goal of the strategy at the end of the day, you got to figure out what of these markets. Now we're talking about this early on as a company develops itself, or if it's going to re-engineer itself, which area we're going to play in. Are we going to be we're going to try to go towards perfect because the profits are better, but maybe we're going to like perfect competition. Could also be the pharmaceutical industry, right? It might be the home lending industry, right? Just lots of different different lenders. I can pretty much go get what I want, where I want, when I need it. Questions on that? And Sarah, you installed your own tires? I'm really impressed because I couldn't do that. I'll have trouble getting the windshield wipers on that I told you about. So that's pretty cool. Good for you. So 3 grand strategies then. Dr. Michael Porter was or is an economist, researcher, author, advisor, speaker, and teacher. I can't remember if he was at was either at Harvard or Northwestern, and business teacher. And he came up with really the 3 grand strategies, right? So you're striving for perfect or imperfect competition. That's 50,000 feet. Now we're coming down to 40. We got to figure out what's the grand strategy. And so he says there are 3 different grand strategies. Let's make it. This is a brand new deck, and I need to make a couple notes for Jennifer. My facilitator notes and things aren't matching up, so just apologize. Let me just grab this. Okay, so what Porter said here is further defining how you're gonna compete. So cost leadership would be what Walmart competes on still and always have. We're going to be the low cost provider. We're going to have probably thinner margins than others, but we're going to make up on it in volume, right? We're going to have a ton of volume that we're going to be able to sell. So maybe you're working, as cost leadership. Differentiation is what are we going to do to differentiate our products from somebody else? When Tesla first started, right, the differentiation strategy is we're producing electric vehicles. Hardly anybody else was doing it, and they certainly weren't doing it at a luxury car way. Like you had the Prius and you had some other things out there, and they were still hybrids. Right. So differentiation, what are you doing different, right, that sets you apart from the competition? And then focus strategy really comes down to something that you're going to really narrow in on. And so like a focus strategy might be, there's a company called Brilliance that is an online retailer for real diamonds and lab grown diamonds. And then so they do it. You can just pick those and you can pick the set you want to put in if you want. That's a focus strategy. I'm not getting watches. I'm not getting anything else. I'm literally looking at that. A focus strategy might also be like a microbrewery. If any of you, I think one of you is in Wisconsin, if I remember correctly, but Spotted Cow, it's a lager produced by New Glarus Brewery, has become kind of this sensational thing. It's like you don't get it outside of Wisconsin. It's actually a pretty decent beer. And every time I go to Wisconsin, I'm like, I got to go get a Spotted Cow, right? It's focus. They're kind of creating that demand by making it special. I remember years ago when I was a kid, you could only get Coors if you were west of the Missouri River. right? Really from Colorado over. It wasn't on the East, so therefore everybody wanted. Well, that was a focus strategy. They were really honing in. So figuring out, like for example, when I was working for Time Warner in the business side, our strategy was we were going to be the high cost provider in the market and do it with really great service. And when Spectrum Enterprise bought us, we were going to be a cost leadership. We were going to be the low cost provider, offer great service, go out and get market share, and then we were going to end up right being able to grow that account and grow it, but let's go get some market share. So it was a big change in that strategy. I actually thought it was a pretty good one. So you just got to figure out what that is and then measure along the way. How are we doing against that strategy, right? Is this the right thing to do? Is this working? So the 4 strategic types then is at the end of the day, is really Raymond Miles is a professor emeritus at the Dean Berkeley Haas School in California, and Charles Snow, professor at Penn State. And so, what are we going to what's that strategic type we're going to be? And so, the prospector is a strategy where you're looking at what are new businesses that we could get into, right? And so prospector might be we're gonna like prospector really was Amazon. They went from a bookseller to selling all sorts of stuff to having cloud storage to being a prime video provider, music provider, all different things, right? Where might we have the opportunities to go get involved in new things? Okay, so that's a prospector strategy. A defender strategy is a strategy where you might be more of a mature business and you're just going to hang on, right? I got my business, I got my core customers. I'm not going to deal with anything else. I'm going to try to keep my market share from other competition. Okay. The analyzer strategy is kind of a combination of the prospector and defender. It's I've got my core business, but I'm going to go out here in the periphery and look at how we do something different, right? I may dabble in this. My company is a great example, right? We provide geospatial technology to businesses. And my job is, as a change management leader, is to help customers overcome resistance to that technology. It's all people focused. It has nothing to do with technology. So it's a bit of an analyzer strategy. We thought, well, we've got an opportunity here because this technology is growing pretty quickly where we can, really help them adopt it. So got your core business, where might we be able to basically put our toe in the water, so to speak, and see if it's a good opportunity. And a reactor is not a good place to be. A reactor strategy is, and you'll see a lot of this really, in my experience, more from companies that have publicly listed, that have stock. Oh my gosh, we had a bad quarter, right? You're only as good as what the street says. My stock price is going to be in the toilet. We need to just, let's go do 12 things, and they throw it at the wall. And then you don't know if something worked, what was it? If it didn't, what was it? So reactor is, I heard Zig Ziglar say it well. You can respond or react. If you go to the doctor and you're sick and he gives you medicine and comes back and says your body's responding well, it's a good thing, right? Your body's reacting to the medicine. That's not good. Okay, so you don't want to be in that reactor, right? You at the end of the day, I'm not saying you don't want to change what you're doing, but you also don't want to just change something really quick when you're going to have seasons or periods where things just may not work. Maybe you tweak something like that. And then ultimately, it's about the value chain. And so Michael Porter comes back with the grand strategies. And really, the value chain is really the entire process. And so, I want you to know these and then think HR touches all of these. right? In particular, in the primary activities. So we've got inbound logistics. Okay, so we've got a lot of things about how do we get materials, things in, and this became a really big problem in the value chain with COVID when the supply chain was interrupted, right? A lot of people couldn't get in either finished products or materials that they needed, right? You've got operations, right? How do we necessarily build it, compile it, put it together, run it, and then outbound, how do we get out the door to the market? Okay, so you've got then marketing and sales. How does anybody know what we have, what it's going to cost, how we do it, and then how do we service that? And so you can see those things have to happen. If there is something that is broke, then everything after that, right, really becomes a bit of a challenge. And some of the work you do might actually end up hurting worse than helping. And then so support activities with the value chain, obviously the firm's infrastructure. We've got technology development. How can we do it better using tech? Procurement, right? Getting things like capital, materials, supplies, people, and then obviously the human resource people, right? We to do all of these things up here. Oops. It all takes people, right? We got to have good people, the right people, and the right things put in place to go ahead and make sure that's successful. Any questions so far? I'm going to pop this next knowledge check up. Keep an eye on chat. Remember, you can put your answers in chat, just me or to everyone. So our knowledge check here, the three major approaches we discussed to achieving long-term competitive advantages are, now these go back to Michael Porter, right? Cost leadership, and is it A, quality and production efficiency, resource allocation and market share, cost containment and sharing, or was it differentiation of products or focus in on products? And Linda, might you show up on my attendance as Linda Marie? I just want to make sure I got the right person. Okay, perfect. That way I just want to make sure I got you for attendance. I thought so, but wanted to ask. Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, you got it right. Good for you, right? It is D, differentiation and focus. So well done. And one of the things I would say too, in looking at these three things, cost, leadership, differentiation, focus, is those are pretty long-term plays, right? When you're kind of deciding to do that, you're all in with it, right? And if you go to change that strategy, and you can, just know that that is going to be a major disruption to the organization, and people, for the most part, don't like disruption. So if you're going to change a strategy, know there needs to be, HR is going to be front and center of that, and you're going to have a lot of work to do to bring people along with that as well. So now the strategic management process, okay, is, I think this is exhibit 6 in the book, really illustrates the 6-step process recommended to analyze internal and external factors in identifying competitive advantage. Okay, so we're going to look at all this and say what might give us that competitive advantage. So it's really what you're doing is a SWOT analysis. Okay, you're analyzing the organization's resources. So where are we strong, where are we weak? Might be what's our capital, our people, maybe it's something like a patent, funding, right? Something of that nature. And then you want to look at the opportunities and threats, and that's external. What markets might we be able to go after, right? Where might we have threats in terms of maybe political change? new government regulation. Right now, inflation's gone up, right? The threat is it's just horribly expensive to borrow capital. Maybe a new competitor's coming in, new competitor has a new product, what have you. And so you do that SWOT analysis, and then you say, based on all of this, now this is our strategy. We're going to look at our strengths and our weaknesses, and how do we capitalize on our strengths and get our weaknesses stronger or not play to them. And we know what the opportunities and threats are. Let's build a strategy. Let's implement that strategy. And early on, then let's evaluate it and monitor it for the results. And then you've got the strategic alignment, right? And so really, this is more kind of along the lines of the structure of the organization. The corporate strategy, what businesses are we in? What should we be in? Provides guidance for managing, allocating resources. Then you got maybe the business unit strategy, might help determine what the competitive advantage is, maybe areas of cost or differentiation. Like corporate strategy at General Electric is X, and then you've got the business unit of locomotives, jet engines, right? Light bulbs, appliances, and medical gear. And then under each of those business units, you've got, you might have research and design, operation strategy, certainly sales and marketing, production, and then human resources as well. So how are you then kind of building out the organization to be able to execute on that strategy and ultimately, make money for the organization? And so with that, then you want to look at what are the organizational capabilities. Okay, so what do you need these areas to do well? For example, in human resources, what do we need to know? Well, we need to understand things like hiring, right? We need to and make sure we got the right job descriptions to bring the right people in. Training, how are we going to not only train new hires, but continue to develop that talent throughout the life of their time with us? Succession planning, going to be really key, right? If we got a lot of turnover, right? How do we fill those roles? And then certainly a big one is comp. I think performance planning should be in that square as well. Organizational capabilities, right? Well, we might need to have product innovation, certainly technology, production, distribution, and then ultimately we put those together to say what's the business strategy that we're looking at. And so, as I mentioned earlier, you got the vision and mission and the strategy. You've got the organization, structure, the systems, the process, the culture. It's go. We've got this all together and we're going to start selling widgets. Well, you want to get that feedback back from employees, back from customers, right? To say, hey, we're either on target or we're not, or here's where we might have gaps. So really looking at what we're doing, is it working? Sometimes it does. Sometimes it works great and you well thought out, and sometimes the best laid strategy just becomes a dud, right? It just doesn't take off or doesn't work for whatever reason. Point being, folks, you want to know that as soon as possible so you can make some course corrections, not wait. We knew early on in our bid to go to, 5 billion from 2.5 billion, that we were, at times on target, at times we were kind of falling behind that. And when we made the switch charter, we fell way behind it. And so we had to give some feedback that if this is still valid, then we gotta drastically re-engineer the way we do things. And I'll tell a little bit more about that story when we get into Unit 3. So there is some thought there around the resource-based theory of the firm. And so it's like, what resources do we have that maybe are rare, non-tradable, non-substitutable, maybe valued by the market and really difficult to imitate? So it might be, for example, people. I think that's one of the biggest opportunities in businesses, right? That if you have good people, good leadership, they become a competitive advantage. For some, it's physical resources, right? Like buildings, locations, vehicles. I'd really rather go, if I'm going to go into office, I want to go into a nice one, not a dump. right? And then financial resources, capital, right? Do we have lenders, investors? Can we borrow that money, right? Do we have enough to do what we want to really make that business work? And sometimes financial resources, we're going to have to float, right? That a company may not be, profitable right out of the gate. So we got to have enough money to float that as this company grows and develops. So we have Michael Porter again, and this comes back to looking at his five forces model. And this is a model that Dr. Porter created. You might see this on your exam. And the five forces model suggests that an industry's profit potential is a function of the interactions among these five forces, right? So if you think about these five forces, you can use this analysis to examine an industry's profit potential and to establish a defensible competitive advantage. So in other words, it's like know us, know thy market, right? And so if you think about this, competitive rivalry is what is the strength of the competition in the industry? Okay, if it's really strong, right, what am I going to do? If it's not, how are we going to deal with that? Supplier power is the ability of suppliers to drive up the prices of your inputs. Okay, that really becomes a challenge when we're living in a market now with high inflation, right? That, I went and bought a bag of bugles today that was twice as small as it was almost $5. Like, okay, you have those types of things. Buyer power, the strength of your customers to drive down your prices. The threat of substitution, the extent to which maybe different products or services can be used in place of your own, right? So threat of substitution might be, do I buy the store brand of green beans and potato chips and soda and ice cream and everything else versus the name brand, right? Because it's cheaper. So, if you're going to be Coca-Cola, you're going to have to market one way versus the Food Lion version of that soda. And then ultimately, it's about the threat of new entry. How easy is it for new competitors to enter the market? If they see you're making good profits, then how easy is it for me to come in and do the same thing and ultimately drive prices down, right? The more competitors you have, right, the more that prices should go down. Now, they might go down relative to each other and still be really expensive due to inflation. So at the end of the day, what I want you to take away from the slide is, as a company, you got to be looking at all of this. And from an HR perspective, how do we support the company in doing each of those types of things? Competitor analysis then is just what it sounds like, right? You want to look at your competitors and you want to figure out, like, well, how do our goals compare against theirs? Now, if you have competitors that are public companies, you'll get a lot of information from their SEC filings. Sometimes they're not, might not necessarily be that easy to find, but you want to take a look at it. You can do it maybe through their advertising or what have you. You can get some pretty good ideas. You want to look at your current strategy. How are we competing? And is it effective? Do we know if it's effective or not? Assumptions, what do we assume for the future? Right? Is inflation going to go down? Is it going to go up? Right? Are we going to have a change in leadership in the White House? We're going to have change in leaderships in our states, right? Are we going to go to a digital currency versus not? Right? All those types of things. What's our consumers going to have money to buy something, right? And then ultimately capabilities. What are the strengths and weaknesses of each of the competitors? And then how's that line up with us, and where might we be able then to best position ourselves against each competitor to be effective? And so we've got HR project management then, and this is becoming more pronounced, I think, in the industry. At least it wasn't really a thing at all until really my last 5 years when I was with Charter. And it's really looking at how do we project manage the things that we're doing. And so we had a group of project managers in the organization. And so if I was going to change, let's say, the commission plan, or I was going to really redesign a new hire curriculum or launch a new workshop, I might have a project manager that will help me, make sure that we have some structure around it. So what's the kickoff of the project? The planning, what are we trying to accomplish, the end state, how are we going to execute it? Gantt charts are perfect for this, right? Monitoring, controlling, meeting, where are we against our timeline? And then closure. I got a project manager right now working with me on a new workshop I'm building at work. And we started it in October, and we're going to have it basically done here at the end of February, and we're on target for that. Would we have gotten there without project management? Probably not, right? Where focus goes, energy flows. It's one of the, my wife had worked for Tony Robbins for a number of years, and one of the things. So think about project management in terms of what you're trying to do, from impacting performance review changes, might be new training developments, going through doing a job analysis, maybe going through a comp analysis, broadbanding. You want to look at some project management to help if you have that available to you in your organization. And then our second knowledge check, resource-based theory of the firm claims that an organization's competitive advantage is determined by, so resources, remember we looked at like money, we looked at basically it was this, human resources, physical, financial. Resource-based theory of the firm claims that an organization's competitive advantage is determined by its core capability, what they do really well. Now, this was in the book. Relationship with suppliers and buyers, superiority over rival firms, or the ability to limit new entrants into the industry. What do you think? Resource-based theory of the firm claims that an organization's competitive advantage is determined by its bit of a tricky one. Well, we're kind of all over the place. That's pretty normal. So here's the deal on this question. So we're going to kind of deconstruct some of these questions as we go. All four of these actually make a lot of sense. I could sit down and I could argue a case for each of these. I could very easily, right? The key here is, what are they asking for? And so that answer is going to be specifically written out in the book. It's resource-based theory says, just due to time, I want to make sure you get through and give me the answer. It is A, our core capability, what we do best, right, is our strength. It's our best resource. What Tesla does best is produce luxury electric vehicles. And to this point, they've done it better than most everybody else. Ford, Toyota, Nissan, Chevy are getting into that game, right? But some of the other competitors have either gone bankrupt or they're not doing well, right? And so you want to look at your resource here. It's the core capability. And our last few minutes tonight, we'll talk about HR control and evaluation. Okay, so we've gone through the whole strategy of what we're trying to do organizationally. Now it's how do we talk about the control and evaluation that we can put in. And we ultimately want to list and describe quantitative and qualitative measures of HR effectiveness. Oh, it was A. It was core capability. It was A. Amita, sorry. That one right there. Yep, sorry about that. Yeah, if I sometimes I think I've said it. If I haven't, just ask questions, because I'm trying to think ahead here. So hang in there, Linda. If we need to catch up like early next week and fill any dots or whatever, I'm happy to do that for you. So we've all been there, trust me. All right. And so tonight, on this last part, we want to describe quantitative and qualitative measures of HR effectiveness. identify key performance indicators or KPIs and describe their benefit within the organizational scorecard, and then recognize the value add of HR outsourcing. Where does it make sense that maybe we give that to another organization to do for us? And so ultimately, right, the HR budgeting process, well, we got to have it, right? It's an estimate of the operating results of a company for a future period. And so really when you're budgeting, you got three main things you want to look at. How do we coordinate activities across not only HR, but our business units and integrate them? How do we then motivate people to action? And then ultimately, how do we control and evaluate, right? And so understand that money in the majority of places is not a finite resource, right? You might have billions to work with, you might have a few hundred. And then what are we doing? Did we get the best use of that expense, right? That investment. And then this is interesting. We're looking at the end of the day, and this has been something that I wrestled with a lot, and I'm sure some of you do as well, probably the majority of you do, is in some companies, HR is seen as an expense. And frankly, we are, because per se, we don't generate any revenue. Now, I make the argument, and this is why we're looking at this effectiveness, that we do generate revenue, or we help others in the organization generate revenue, right? But we need to understand what's our effectiveness. And so if you look at this, right, we got four things. For one, you've got subjective attitudinal measures. This captures value of the entire HR department, or simply put it, is within the measure of HR. It's what value do we add, okay? So HR audits, the audit process, right? Sorry, mouse got away from me. So you've then got so that's HR audit, statistical benchmark measure, right? This is quantifiable and represented in percentage ratios, correlations. So this might be things like you can do an audit like, employee satisfaction, right? You might have time to hire, turnover rates, right? Those type of things, time to fill. Human resource accounting is really about, okay, if we're going to stand up a new department, what's the outlay cost? What's it going to cost to open up, a new call center, right, where we're going to do our own service or add that? What's the outlay cost? Replacement cost is what's the average it takes to replace a position, right? So sales rep, director, vice president, executive, right? What's the replacement cost for those type of things, so we can budget for those. And then ultimately it's about the human, resource value. What value do we put into adding back to the organization? And then cost in HR activities is, the financial contributions of HR activities. So for example, we have launched an EAP that maybe we saw a reduction in absenteeism or turnover, or maybe a reduction in insurance expense because people were getting some of the help they needed and they were being able to be more productive, not maybe spending as much on insurance and what have you. So, at the end of the day, the HR audit one's the one that scares most people. And it shouldn't. It's where you go back to the business and say, are we adding value, right? And if the answer is no, well, then you need to know that before like COVID comes and HR gets shut down. Well, let's just get rid of training and such and such. Good businesses said, hey, we got a lot of training we never get to. Let's do it while we're not doing other things. So looking at, again, being good business value to your business partner, right? And have them say, hey, do they look at you as a value, and they can see that. Now, I'll drive more into that when we get to Unit 3 about how we went from not tracking anything on training to knowing specifically what impact was having on the bottom line, we got a really good audit because sales like, man, this training's great. I know exactly what we're getting out of these curriculum changes. So we'll go through that here in a few weeks. And then ultimately, you've got your key performance indicators. So I said measure early, measure often, and measure everything. So you want to look at a couple different ways to do it. And I always say when you measure stuff, always have it tied back to that business unit you're supporting. Okay, so they can see the impact. A lagging indicator is it's done and over and you can't do anything about it, right? When the Super Bowl is over and the Chiefs beat the Lions 25-21, that's it. That score is a lagging indicator. You know what happened in the past, but nothing is going to change that. No, I'm just making an assumption that the Lions and Chiefs are going to get in there, but you get my point. At the end of the month, 30 days are out. How many widgets did we sell? Well, you can't go back and add anymore. A leading indicator is different. It's a KPI that says, based on this, this is where you're headed. So you might have engagement scores. If engagement scores are really high, leading indicator is you're probably going to have a lot of production and performance. If your engagement scores are low when you do it, you might have some rough times ahead. And so you might want to look at those, like this data goes back to the business in terms of what you would call either an HR scorecard or an HR dashboard. I also say sometimes lagging indicators can be leading indicators. You know, if you're 2 days into a month, you can annualize, or let's say 5 days, you're a week into the month. Based on that, you can do a statistical run and say, based on the first week, we're trending to be X amount ahead of budget or behind budget. And so that becomes a bit of a leading indicator there as well. And then a balanced scorecard. This is also referred to as a dashboard. It's a portal. It's a view where the data that you're reporting on is there. It's a good way to basically show the metrics of what we're doing, right? And so you know, best thing you want to do is make sure if you're doing all this work, your customers, right, your internal customers know. So you want to look at maybe the strategic perspective, measure his achievement towards maybe those strategic goals. Operational would be more like performance metrics about, you know, how effective are our processes in the operation. Financial, you know, are we able to do it fairly cost effective? And then, you know, customer service wise, is what we're doing giving good customer service scores? Do we need to change something there as well? And ultimately the impact that has then on stockholders, if you're a public company, certainly on your customers, employees. And I think another one is just stakeholders like your vendors and people that you're getting maybe inputs or services from, but they're also relying on you to be successful as well. And then ultimately there's the concept of outsourcing. Okay. Human resource outsourcing, or HRO, means really outsourcing specialists perform different types of functions. So you might have a professional employer organization. They might have a co-management relationship where a PEO, right, professional employer organizations, firms that provide HR services to a company. It's an outsourcing destination that manages all HR functions on behalf of the employer. You might say, you know what, I'm going to hire a PEO. I might even, you know, so I'll hire the employees. They'll take over the responsibility and the funding, and then they're going to charge me a fee for doing that. PEOs can be also subsets. Like, for example, I used a PEO when we outsourced, even as large as we were, we outsourced all our leave administration. Some companies might outsource everything like other leadership training, right? Employee leasing is where, on the other hand, you employ the employees and lease the individuals back to the company, okay? So basically, it's like having contractors. What it does is takes away all the payroll taxes and the ability to have to manage that and manage benefits. You're probably paying for that anyway because another company is going to have that and do it. But different ways to look at it. And this is from the book, so this is a new slide. Fill in the blank. Blank blank is an approach for an organization to calculate the cost of turnover through such measures as separation costs, replacement costs, training and development costs, and lost performance. Take a stab at that, and that's our last slide for the night. You starting to see a few more questions like this pop up on the exam. In the interest of time, I'm going to give the answer. So you're close. It's actually cost accounting. Okay. So what we're seeing here is outlay cost is what it basically takes to start up a brand new organization. Replacement cost is what it takes to replace a head. Here, we're looking at turnover. We got separation, replacement, training and development, lost performance. So that would be cost accounting. How all those things. It's what you all looked at isn't necessarily wrong. We're just going a step back because we're looking at all these different expenses in an organization, and so that would become cost accounting. And we are done this evening. We'll pick up with HR, technology and communication on Monday. Questions on anything that we covered tonight? Helpful? Makes sense? Good. All right. Excellent. Yeah, well, Cheryl, I appreciate that, right? I mean, it's a lot. So yeah, take a look at cost accounting data. We can talk. So with that, everybody, have a great weekend. If you need anything, I'm back now, so not traveling the rest of the week. Got any questions? You're looking at this tomorrow, Friday, over the weekend, just email them to me, and I'll get you an answer as quick as I can. And then we'll jump back in Monday night. So I wish you all a wonderful end of your week. Have a great weekend. Hope you get some rest. And I appreciate you. Good answers tonight, and I appreciate your time and attention. And hang in there.